Imagine your college roommate getting knocked up by an older married man and then demanding you give up your bedroom and take the night shifts when the baby cries. Yes, this girl literally expected her teenage roommate to be her live-in co-parent. The entitlement is absolutely off the charts, and the fallout is a spectacular train wreck. We have a 19-year-old college student who just wanted a normal living situation. She had her own apartment, but her aunt suggested that getting a roommate would be a smart financial move to help split the bills. So she brings in 21-year-old Kayla, and for the first year, things are totally fine. But then, 2 months ago, Kayla drops a massive bomb. She is pregnant. The writer is completely stunned, mostly because the guy Kayla's been dating for the last 6 months is significantly older and totally married. The writer tries to be polite and offers congratulations to avoid being rude, but internally the alarm bells are deafening, and those alarm bells were completely justified because the married boyfriend immediately ghosts Kayla. Even worse, the absolute last message this guy left her was a threat, stating he would physically beat her if she ever came around his family. The writer begs Kayla to report this terrifying threat, but Kayla refuses, accusing the writer of just being out to get her boyfriend. Weeks pass in this tense limbo while Kayla claims she is figuring things out. Finally, she sits the writer down and delivers her grand master plan. She is keeping the baby, and she expects to raise it right there in their shared apartment. The writer is instantly upset because this environment is the furthest thing from suitable for an infant. She lays out the cold, hard facts. They live in a small two-bedroom apartment with notoriously thin walls. The writer is a full-time student who also grinds through exhausting night shifts at work. On top of that, Kayla herself is in school studying to be a lawyer, which requires massive amounts of quiet study time. And the absolute kicker? The lease explicitly states that they are not allowed to have any long-term guests. The writer actually laughs at the absurdity of classifying a newborn baby as a long-term guest, but the point stands. Kayla immediately gets defensive, arguing that a baby is not a guest and insisting she can figure it all out. She then spirals into a massive venting session, crying about how much she loves this married man who won't return her calls. To make matters even more disastrous, Kayla reveals she cannot move back home. Her parents are completely furious about her having a baby out of wedlock, to the point where they are officially cutting off her college tuition. The writer thinks her parents' reaction is a little crazy, but it does not change the terrifying reality of the situation. Then comes the absolute audacity. Kayla asks the writer if she is willing to help her. And by help, she doesn't mean offering emotional support. Kayla explicitly asks to switch bedrooms so she can have the much larger master suite. She also asks the writer to help wake up and soothe the baby when it inevitably cries in the middle of the night. The writer shuts this down instantly. She tells Kayla that if this is her plan, she needs to start looking for a new roommate right now. But Kayla panics, saying she is already close to the writer and is too scared to live with a stranger. The writer holds her ground, firmly stating that she signed up for a college roommate, not to be an unpaid babysitter for an infant. She issues the ultimate ultimatum. If Kayla is keeping the baby, she has exactly 4 months to find a new place to live before the lease comes up for renewal. Kayla completely breaks down, sobbing and accusing the writer of being a horrible, heartless monster for wanting to kick a vulnerable pregnant woman out onto the streets. She weaponizes her financial ruin, crying that the writer knows she absolutely cannot afford a place of her own right now. The writer, trying to remain pragmatic, offers her a list of women's shelters and local resources that can provide professional assistance. But the damage is done. Word gets out to their mutual friends, and suddenly the writer is getting bombarded with messages calling her a terrible, terrible, selfish person. The writer brilliantly points out the blatant hypocrisy. If these friends think she is so evil for not letting Kayla stay, why aren't any of them offering up their own spare bedrooms? She knows exactly why. They want to look supportive without actually taking on the massive burden of a screaming newborn. Let's put the writer under the microscope for a second. Is she being too harsh? She is 19 years old, pulling night shifts to survive and navigating a full-time college course load. She owns the lease, she was there first, and she gave her roommate a 4-month heads up, which is incredibly generous. The writer is protecting her peace, her education, and her sanity. Now, look at the absolute psychological gymnastics Kayla is performing. She is 21 years old and supposedly studying to be a lawyer. Yet, she refuses to take any legal action against the man who fathered her child. Commenters were screaming that she needs to file for child support, especially since the guy is a practicing lawyer who can definitely afford it. But Kayla refuses because she does not want to get him in trouble. She is fiercely protecting a man who threatened her with physical violence, while simultaneously demanding that a 19-year-old girl sacrifice her entire college experience to raise his child. Kayla is terrified of the consequences of her own actions. She has lost her parents' financial backing, and her married boyfriend has vanished, so she is desperately trying to trap the only safety net she has left, her teenage roommate. It is a terrifying level of manipulation dressed up as helpless victimhood. And this entire disaster perfectly highlights the toxic culture of performative outrage and forced altruism. We all know those people, the mutual friends in this story who are so quick to judge and condemn someone else's boundaries. It is incredibly easy to play the moral high ground and call someone selfish when it is not your sleep schedule being destroyed, your peace being shattered, or your lease being violated. These friends love the drama and the gossip, but the second the writer suggests they take Kayla in, the room goes dead silent. It is a universal frustration. People will demand that you set yourself completely on fire just to keep someone else warm, but when you hand them the matches, they run in the opposite direction. The courtroom of public opinion in the comments was an absolute bloodbath. A few people tried to play devil's advocate, arguing that maybe the writer should just ride out the lease and help a little bit because Kayla is in such a desperate situation. But the community violently rejected that narrative. The most savage rebuttals completely dismantled Kayla's entitlement. One user bluntly stated that Kayla is not looking for a roommate, she's looking for a nanny and a co-parent. Another commenter warned the writer not to cave, pointing out that Kayla is building her entire future on sand, and giving her false hope that she can stay in the apartment would actually be the cruelest thing the writer could do. The absolute best moment in the comments came from the writer's hilarious detail about the lease forbidding long-term guests. One currently pregnant commenter jumped in and joked, "I am currently pregnant with my second long-term guest. When he is born, do I issue him an 18-year lease?" Another person fired back, saying, "More like 25 in this economy." It brought some much-needed humor to a deeply infuriating situation. But on a serious note, the legal advice was pouring in. People warned the writer that she needs to formally notify the landlord that she will not be renewing the lease with Kayla, because if Kayla refuses to leave when the baby arrives, the eviction process could take months and drag the writer down with it. The writer is absolutely not the a-hole. She is the only person in this entire circus operating in reality. Kayla made a string of incredibly destructive choices, having an affair with a married man, refusing to hold him accountable, and alienating her parents, and now she wants a 19-year-old to pay the price. If I were the writer, I wouldn't just hold my ground. I would go completely scorched earth on those hypocritical mutual friends. It is time to drop a text message into the group chat that shuts down the performative outrage forever. Here is the exact blueprint. Copy and paste this to every single person calling you selfish. Hey guys, since you are all so deeply concerned about Kayla's well-being and think I am a terrible person for not renewing our lease, I have great news. Kayla needs a place to stay in exactly 4 months. Since you are such amazing, supportive friends, please let me know which one of you is officially offering up your spare bedroom for her and the baby. I am more than happy to help pack her boxes and drive her over to your place this weekend. Let me know who is taking the first shift. Send that message, put your phone on, do not disturb, and watch the absolute silence roll in. It is time for everyone involved to face the music. Kayla needs to hire an actual lawyer, not play pretend student, and go after that deadbeat married man for every single penny of child support he owes. And the writer needs to pack her bags, find a quiet studio apartment, and never look back. Have you ever had a roommate try to drag you into their chaotic life choices? What would you do if your roommate demanded you give up your bedroom for their baby? Let me know your absolute worst roommate horror stories in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you love watching entitled people get a reality check, and I will catch you in the next one. You fund your partner's entire existence for 6 excruciating years while handing his relatives 50 grand to keep them afloat. And the absolute second he finally lands a six-figure job, he secretly opens a separate bank account and lets his mother call you a freeloader. Buckle up for this one. We are looking at a wife who spent the first 6 years of her relationship operating as a human ATM for her completely unemployed husband and his wildly entitled extended family. She worked in the medical field, making a modest $36,000 a year, but because she was incredibly frugal, she paid every single bill while her husband sat at home battling untreated ADHD and depression. But she was not just carrying him. Over those 6 years, she funneled a staggering $50,000 to his mother, brother, and sister. She paid their mortgages, their car notes, and even their kids' sports fees without ever asking for a single dime in return. The sheer financial recklessness of his family is breathtaking. The writer specifically recalls a moment where she handed the sister-in-law nearly $500 because she was crying about an overdue car payment. Less than a month later, that exact same sister-in-law packed up her two daughters and her husband and went on a wildly expensive Disney cruise. They were not destitute. They were strategically using the writer's income to fund their luxury vacations while crying poverty. The absolute breaking point hit when her mother-in-law showed up unannounced, demanding a $3,000 contribution for a family lawyer. The wife generously handed over the cash, be it only to discover she was the literal only person who contributed. She immediately slammed the vault shut, cut off the money supply, and surprisingly, her husband completely agreed with her. Right around this time, she discovers she is 6 months pregnant, and the husband finally has a massive wake-up call. He gets medicated, enters therapy, earns his trucking license, and immediately starts crushing it at work. Fast forward 2 years. The husband is pulling in $140,000 a year, and the wife has been a devoted stay-at-home mom since she was 8 months pregnant. They decide to host a family dinner, the very first time they have all been together in 2 years, because the in-laws completely stopped calling the second the free cash dried up. Everything seems fine until the husband randomly excuses himself to run to the store for a missing ingredient. The exact second the front door clicks shut, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law completely corner the wife. The mother-in-law demands to know when the wife is returning to the workforce, declaring that her being a stay-at-home mom simply does not work. The sister-in-law jumps in, whining about how unfair it is to the husband that the wife has zero income, heavily implying that they are furious their personal cash cow is gone. The wife instantly fires back, reminding these women that she handed them 50 grand over 6 years and did way more than her fair share. And the mother-in-law's response is pure, unadulterated delusion. She looks the wife dead in the eye and claims she paid that money back by dropping off expired food bank donations and dumping broken 1930s furniture at their house. The wife absolutely snaps, pointing out that she spent over 8 grand on the mother-in-law alone. The argument explodes, culminating in the mother saying the husband must have paid the wife back by now since she hasn't done anything for 2 years. The wife screams at them to get the hell out of her house, threatening to call the cops until they finally leave. When the husband gets back, the wife expects him to be furious on her behalf. Instead, he goes completely quiet. He apologizes for their behavior, but immediately starts justifying it, saying they probably just think she should help with the bills. He looks at the woman who funded his entire life and says everyone knows a household cannot survive on one income in 2026, suggesting he could work fewer hours if she got a job. This is a man whose total monthly expenses are barely $4,000 while taking home over 11 grand a month. We need to look incredibly closely at the writer's own choices here. Handing over 50 grand to capable adults while you live in a tiny studio apartment paying $650 a month in rent is completely wild. She justified it by saying they were super close, hanging out with the sister 5 days a week and seeing the brother every single weekend. But the reality is, she was buying their affection. The second the money stopped, they vanished like cockroaches when the kitchen light turns on. Now, let us dissect the absolute fraud of a husband she is married to. He claims they cannot survive on one income, yet he is hoarding almost $200,000 in cash. But here is the most sinister part. It is entirely his savings. When he was unemployed for 6 years, his name was plastered on her bank account. The second he got his high-paying trucking job, he completely removed his name from their joint account and opened a brand new one exclusively in his name. His sudden financial panic is utterly laughable when you look at his spending habits. He claims they cannot survive on one income, yet he is actively making payments on a personal car, a massive truck, and a motorcycle. He is financing 3 separate vehicles while his wife's single car is completely paid off. He is living a life of absolute excess, hoarding 200 grand and then turning around to complain that buying baby formula is breaking the bank. And the psychological warfare he is playing is staggering. Just 2 weeks before this disastrous dinner, he was literally begging her to stay home. He told her he appreciated her, that he didn't want anyone else raising their child, and even floated the idea of homeschooling because he didn't trust public schools. He put on a performance of the century, pretending to be the ultimate supportive partner, only to set her up for a brutal ambush the very next week. To make matters infinitely worse, the wife is not even fully supported right now. She actually works from home, writing children's books and doing digital marketing, pulling in about $650 a month. And what does she do with that money? She pays for her own car insurance, her phone bill, the internet, all the baby supplies, the toilet paper, and the laundry detergent. Her husband, making $140,000 a year, is forcing her to buy the household toilet paper while he aggressively hoards 200 grand. He is enacting a textbook campaign of financial abuse. This exposes a profoundly toxic dynamic that plagues so many modern marriages. We see a terrifying number of men who eagerly demand a traditional stay-at-home wife because it benefits them to have a personal chef, a live-in nanny, and a maid. But they violently refuse to step up and actually be a traditional provider. They want the aesthetic of a trad wife without carrying the financial responsibility that makes that dynamic function. It is a disgusting double standard where a woman's money is viewed as community property to be drained by the husband and his extended family. But the minute the man earns a paycheck, that money is completely isolated and protected as his personal empire. This shifting of the goalposts creates a scenario where a woman pours the best years of her life and her prime earning potential into stabilizing a broken man, only to be tossed aside and labeled a freeloader the second he can finally stand on his own 2 feet. The comment section immediately caught fire, and the psychological breakdowns were absolutely ruthless. Naturally, a few critics tried to poke holes in the story, questioning the basic mathematics of the situation. One skeptic demanded to know how on earth the writer could possibly afford to give away $50,000 over 6 years on a $36,000 salary. The community and the writer utterly decimated this doubt. The writer dropped the receipts, explaining that they lived completely off the grid in the backwoods, 4 miles from their nearest neighbor, paying dirt cheap rent with only one car payment. Their total living expenses barely scratched $1,600 a month. Giving away 8 grand a year to his family was not impossible. It just meant she sacrificed absolutely everything else to keep them happy. But the absolute turning point in the comments was the realization that the husband orchestrated this entire ambush. People accurately pointed out that the husband running to the store for a missing ingredient, right as the in-laws arrived, was a highly calculated move. Another commenter absolutely nailed the psychology of the husband, pointing out that an overwhelming number of men are completely terrified of their own domineering mothers. They turn into sheepish, cowardly little boys the second mommy enters the room, and they will gladly throw their own wives onto the train tracks just to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. The husband knew his mother was furious about the closed bank vault. He knew she was coming over to start a war. Instead of standing at the front door and telling his mother to respect his wife, he completely vanished. He used the classic excuse of running to the store, creating the perfect vacuum for his family to attack his wife, hoping they would bully her back into the workforce so he wouldn't have to confront his own financial anxieties. The betrayal runs so deep that in a live update, the writer revealed she was actively text arguing with her husband, and he had the sheer audacity to gaslight her about the timeline. He actually texted her claiming he was only unemployed for 3 years, completely rewriting history and insisting he was helping out the whole time. The community was screaming at the writer to wake up and recognize the severe financial abuse taking place. People were urging her to immediately pull her credit reports and lock down her social security number, suspecting that a man who lies about his employment history and secretly funnels money into private accounts is likely hiding massive debts or engaging in financial infidelity. One user sharply advised her to stop arguing over text and start quietly making copies of every single financial document in that house. If he wants to play a game of historical revisionism, she needs to bring the cold, hard paper trail to a ruthless divorce attorney. This is the point of no return. The writer is completely and totally in the right, and she is married to a deeply manipulative, historically revisionist coward. She held this man together when he was an absolute shell of a human being, and his grand gesture of gratitude is to financially isolate her, let his family verbally attack her in her own home, and then gaslight her about her own sacrifices. There is no therapy that can fix a man who systematically removes you from a bank account after watching you pay for his existence for 6 solid years. It is time for the writer to embrace absolute, unyielding, petty vengeance. She needs to screenshot his bank balances, secure every single financial document in that house, and send him an exact, emotionless text message. You allowed your family to disrespect me in my own home after I spent $50,000 keeping them from drowning. You sat in silence for 6 years while my paycheck kept a roof over your head. But the second you got a job, you hid your money in a separate account and let your mother call me a burden. Since my presence here is clearly a financial strain on you, I will be returning to work immediately. However, you will now be 100% financially responsible for full-time daycare, a weekly house cleaning service, and half of all evening childcare duties. Do not ever attempt to rewrite the history of my sacrifice again. You can either deposit half of that $200,000 savings into my account by Friday, or my lawyer will legally force you to do it in divorce court, where you will also be paying maximum child support on your $140,000 salary. Send that message, lock the bedroom door, and let him panic. Because men who think they hold all the financial power always fold the second they realize how wildly expensive a divorce truly is. What would you do if your partner's family treated you like an ATM and your partner completely threw you under the bus? Have you ever dealt with a partner who magically rewrites the past to make themselves look better? Drop your absolute wildest stories in the comments below. Absolutely smash that subscribe button. If you love watching toxic family dynamics get completely exposed, and I will catch you in the next one. Imagine your husband calling you crazy for not wanting to chase a toddler for 3 hours. So you leave him alone with the kid, and he lasts exactly 60 minutes before running home in absolute shame. Grab your snacks, because this is a masterclass in weaponized incompetence crashing headfirst into reality. We have a 26-year-old writer and her 27-year-old husband who share a totally normal, absolutely chaotic 2-year-old daughter. And if you have ever been around a 2-year-old, you know they are basically tiny, drunken scientists trying to discover gravity by throwing everything you own onto the floor. At their house, it is fine. They have childproofed the place. The sharp corners are padded, the fragile things are hidden, and the environment is controlled. But the problem starts just 5 minutes down the road. The husband has a buddy who lives nearby with his girlfriend, and every single weekend, without fail, they get invited over for coffee or dinner. Now, this couple doesn't have kids. Their house is a minefield of breakable trinkets, sharp coffee tables, and completely accessible hazards. It is the absolute opposite of a baby-proofed sanctuary. For months, this weekend ritual has played out exactly the same way. The writer spends 3 exhausting hours running a marathon inside this house. She is diving to catch falling objects, pulling choking hazards out of the toddler's mouth, and constantly redirecting a tiny human tornado. And what is the husband doing during this 3 hour cardio session? He is sitting at the table, sipping his coffee, chatting with his buddy, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife is single parenting right in front of him. When he casually drops the phrase that chasing a kid is a normal part of parenting, he really means it is a normal part of her parenting, because he sure as hell isn't doing any of it. Finally, the writer snaps. 2 weekends ago, another invite rolls in, and she simply says, "Nope, Pope." She tells her husband she is completely burned out and will not be tagging along to run security detail while he socializes. He rolls his eyes, tells her she is totally overreacting, and drops that ultimate condescending line about it just being part of the job. "Oh, really? Okay, buddy." The writer calmly replies that if he wants their daughter to go, he can take her himself. He accepts the challenge, puffing his chest out, completely blind to the trap he is walking straight into. He packs up the toddler, heads to the friend's house, and 1 hour later, he is back. Barely 60 minutes. He walks through the door in a terrible mood, storming around the house for the rest of the day. When the writer asks how the little solo outing went, he snaps and asks if she feels happy with herself. Let that sink in. He fails at watching his own child for a single hour, and somehow this is his wife's fault. Fast forward to the next weekend, another invite drops. The writer offers a completely reasonable compromise. She asks if they can do 50-50 duty, splitting the child wrangling right down the middle. He just flat out ignores her, refuses to answer, and goes to his buddy's house all by himself. For the entire week, he has been icing her out, throwing these nasty passive-aggressive remarks about her insane need to always be right. Let's look at what is really going on underneath the surface here. Why is the husband lashing out so violently? Is the writer actually being petty, or did she just expose a massive uncomfortable truth? Because a quick update to the story reveals exactly why he only lasted an hour. He didn't just get tired, he got humiliated. While he was fumbling around, trying to control a toddler he clearly has no idea how to manage, his own buddy started making comments about how badly he was struggling. His friend openly mocked his lack of parenting skills. The husband fled the scene because his fragile ego could not handle looking completely incompetent in front of another man. This brings us to a massively toxic dynamic that we see absolutely everywhere: weaponized incompetence disguised as the default parent role. Society has this deeply ingrained, completely bogus idea that mothers just naturally possess this magical innate ability to soothe crying babies and predict when a toddler is about to jump off a sofa. It is a lie. Parenting does not come pre-installed in a woman's DNA. Women are good at it because they have to be. They put in the reps. They do the trial and error. Meanwhile, guys like this husband coast by on the excuse that the child just prefers mom, when the reality is that the child prefers mom because mom actually knows where the snacks are and how to build the Lego tower without having a meltdown. Have you ever been to a family barbecue and noticed the very distinct divide? The women are usually sweating over the stove, fixing plates, and keeping a hawkeye on the kids near the pool, while a group of grown men are planted in lawn chairs, crushing beers and debating sports as if they don't have a single care in the entire world. It is infuriating. The husband in this story is the lawn chair guy. He loved playing the fun dad when it was convenient, but the second he was stripped of his safety net, his wife, he completely crumbled. And instead of experiencing a moment of profound gratitude for everything she does, instead of saying, "Wow, babe, I had no idea how hard you work," he chose resentment. He is punishing her because her absence proved his inadequacy. He wants to drag her back down into being his invisible shield so he doesn't have to face the fact that he is failing as a father. The comment section on this post absolutely erupted, and the psychological teardowns were legendary. One user perfectly captured the sheer audacity of the husband. writing that the natural consequences of being a non involved father is realizing you are single parenting inside your own marriage. But then we have to talk about the absolute gold mine of a comment from a guy who tried to play devil's advocate using the most unhinged analogy possible. This guy jumps into the thread to tell a story about his backyard pool. He complains that he bought a house with a pool and huge trees, and he was the one stuck cleaning the leaves out every single day. His wife refused to let him cut the trees down because they were pretty. So after a massive storm, he forces his wife to clean the pool with him for 3 hours until she finally admits the trees need to go. He proudly posts this, comparing his leaf problem to the writer's toddler problem, basically saying, "Good job, forcing him to suffer so you can get what you want." The community absolutely dragged this guy. People were screaming in the replies, pointing out the insane leap in logic. Someone fired back, asking why he immediately went to the extreme nuclear option of cutting down gorgeous mature trees instead of just buying a pool cover. The rebuttal was brutal, highlighting how some men will literally destroy nature just to prove a point, rather than communicate and find a compromise. But the pool guy totally missed the actual point of the writer's story. The writer didn't want to cut down her kid, she just wanted her partner to do his literal job. And speaking of the kid, one commenter decided to drop the most hilarious sarcastic hot take of the century. They wrote, "I think the daughter sucks as well, honestly. By the time I was 2, I was building my investment portfolio and creating a stocks and shares account. Kids these days just don't know how to get into the grind set." Someone instantly replied that the lack of a vision board at age 1 is obviously the mom's fault because it falls under mom duties. And the fact that this toddler isn't contributing to a 401k yet is ridiculous. It perfectly mocked the husband's absolute disconnect from reality. Toddlers are chaotic gremlins. That is their job description. The husband being shocked 2-year-old was acting like a 2-year-old just proves he has spent zero actual quality time raising her. The absolute best piece of advice came from a seasoned mom who laid out the brutal truth. She wrote that this husband doesn't need to be right. He needs to be embarrassed. He needs more solo time with that little girl. Right now, he is treating his own child like a hot potato, dumping the responsibility onto his wife so he can maintain his bachelor lifestyle with his buddy. He is furious because his wife took away his free pass, and now he is forced to look in the mirror and see a lazy dad staring back. This woman warned the writer, "Do not back down. Do not apologize. Let him sit in his feelings until he figures out how to be an actual father." There is another wild part of this entire situation that almost gets swept under the rug. Why on earth are they always going to the friend's house? The friend lives 5 minutes away. The writer's house is completely baby-proofed and safe. Why can't the friend and his girlfriend come over to their place? The writer casually mentions that before the girlfriend moved in, the buddy used to come over all the time. But now they refuse every single invitation. What is going on there? Is the girlfriend so anti-child that she refuses to enter a house that smells like Cheerios and baby wipes? Or are they just that incredibly selfish? It takes a staggering amount of entitlement to watch a mother sweat and panic for 3 hours every Saturday, actively keeping a child from breaking your precious things, and never once offer to make it easier by just driving 5 minutes up the road to a safe environment. It is a completely one-sided friendship that only caters to the men in the room. So where does this leave our writer? The writer is 100%, undeniably not the a-hole. She set a perfectly healthy, incredibly necessary boundary. She did not scream, she did not throw a tantrum, she just calmly refused to be a human meat shield for a grown man's parental negligence. The husband, on the other hand, is throwing a massive manipulative pity party because he got exposed. He tried to call her bluff, he failed spectacularly, and now he is using emotional abuse. Yes, the silent treatment and passive-aggressive digs are manipulative to try and bully her back into submission. If I were the writer, I wouldn't just hold the line. I would reinforce it with steel. It is time to drop a text message that leaves zero room for debate. If he starts grumbling about this weekend's plans, she needs to look him dead in the eye or send him this exact message. "I am not interested in arguing about who is right. What I am interested in is why you think your social life is more important than being an equal parent. You experienced exactly 1 hour of what I do for 3 hours every single weekend, and it broke you so badly that you ran home and blamed me for it. I am your wife, not your nanny. Until you are ready to split the parenting 50-50, whether we are at home or out in public, I will not be attending these hangouts. And if your friends actually care about seeing us, they can drive the 5 minutes to our house where our daughter is actually safe. I am done apologizing for asking you to be a father. Boom. Send it. Put your phone on airplane mode, grab a glass of wine, and let him choke on the reality of his own actions. Because right now, she isn't raising one toddler, she is raising two. And unfortunately, only one of them has an excuse for wearing diapers. This story is a glaring warning sign about setting precedents in a relationship. If you let someone treat you like the default servant early on, they will absolutely lose their minds when you finally ask them to pick up a broom. Do not let anyone weaponize their own incompetence against you. If they mess up the laundry on purpose so you will just do it yourself, let them wear pink shrunken shirts to work. If they can't handle their own kid for an hour, let them sweat it out in front of their friends until they learn. Have you ever dealt with a partner who magically forgot how to do basic tasks the second you were around? How would you handle a husband who gets mad at you because he sucks at parenting? Drop your wildest stories in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you love unhinged internet drama, and I will catch you in the next one.